Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to our Dynamic Dialogue webinar series. We are Purple Link, and I'm Jane Tierney, the founder of Purple Link. We're back to doing these monthly webinars, and I'm excited to be back on this schedule. I really enjoy doing these. It gives me a chance to share some information and gives me an incentive to do some research and some homework so that I stay current with all the things that are going on in the world. So today we're going to talk about Lean and Six Sigma and why it's worth the effort for companies. So there's a lot of things going on. You might hear a lot about these things and hear about these terms Lean and or Six Sigma. And so we're going to go through a little bit of that. As I said, this is our Dynamic Dialogues webinar series. It's open to any and all supply chain professionals. We are offering them free of charge, and we're going to keep doing that. We have a monthly format. It's the fourth Tuesday of the month at 11:30 Pacific time. So those of you joining from other time zones, I appreciate that. Hopefully this time works out for people. It's should be a forum for sharing thoughts, ideas, challenges that you're experiencing, resource issues, lessons learned. I do a short presentation. It's always less than an hour. We have an open forum. We take questions at the end, and you're welcome to ask questions during the presentation as well. The link that you have is now good through 2025. If you signed up before, you don't have to sign up again, but you can. On the emails, there's a link for registration. So with that, we'll jump right into Lean and Six Sigma. I apologize for this being blurry, but it's a Dilbert cartoon and I borrowed it. And so I want to give credit to Dilbert, but he says, the evil manager says, I just read this great book about how to lean our business processes. And Dilbert, as always, says, uh-oh. The manager says, everybody's doing it. We better jump under the bandwagon before the train leaves the station. And I'm putting you in charge. And then he says, if you need any management support, you know where to go. And of course, Dilbert says, yes, I know where to go for management support. So sometimes we do these kinds of things. We take on these initiatives. We don't really have the internal expertise. We don't know how they're supposed to look, but we've read an article or we've seen something and somebody says, hey, this is the greatest thing since whatever. Sliced bread, my mother used to say all the time. But these initiatives come along and they often get implemented and companies aren't always satisfied with their results. So if you've done some of that or heard some of that, we'll talk a little bit about what you might do to change your result and what you can do going forward. So we're going to say, why should we bother with another initiative? Because we all have uh, resource issues in our workplaces. I tell everyone I've never seen, worked with, heard about an organization that says, gosh, we have plenty of people. We could take that on all the time. So everyone feels the pinch of resources and the skills and the limitations that we have in businesses today. So we're going to talk about what they are a little bit. We're going to show you how to start with the 5 S's, which I think is the cleanest, easiest, and most effective way to start with a Lean or Six Sigma transformation, and talk about how you can add from there. We'll talk about what Six Sigma is and why it's different than Lean, talk about some metrics to measure. And today we don't have a raffle and prizes, so I'm sorry about that. But we're not going to have that at the end of the day, but I will take emails and things like that. So as I said, why bother to do this? Companies need and want improvements to their processes, their procedures, and most of all to their bottom line, their results. That old phrase of faster, better, cheaper is still what companies are trying to do. It still is applicable. So we're trying to get faster time to market, faster product development, faster time to upgrade and implement changes, better quality, better technology, flexibility, agility, responsiveness, customer satisfaction, and you can go on and on and on. Financially, we ask for better return on our investment, return on our assets, higher inventory turns, all of the things that are related to supply chains. And then we always are looking for lower prices. If we can pay less for the products that we need to buy, then that's going to help our cost model. It's going to be able to let us share some price reductions or at least holding the line with our customers. And we're trying to cut not just prices from suppliers, but we're trying to cut our direct costs, our indirect costs, our labor, material, all of those things, implementation costs. And in order to do that, we need tools to track our progress. We want to know that we're getting better and not getting worse, or if we're stagnant and we're not making the changes and we're not seeing any improvements or changes in the what we're recording. So for all these reasons and more, we want to get into things like an initiative around Lean and Six Sigma. And I know that there's lots of reasons that you attend these types of webinars. These topics are broad, supply chain. Everyone, no one knew anything about supply chain until the pandemic, and now everyone thinks they know what supply chain is. And yet, most of the people that I talk to that are a little naive are pretty much not on track with what supply chains are. Thankfully, most of you are supply chain professionals, and so you have a much better understanding. But if you do, then you understand that this topic is so broad that there are lots of different ways you can look at it. There's different ways to apply things like Lean and Six Sigma to something as nebulous as a supply chain. So we're going to talk about some highlights, some things you can do. There's lots of courses that you can take, books you can read on these topics. Some are a little overwhelming. As we'll look at in a little bit, Six Sigma is very heavy on statistics. And if you aren't a math person or a statistic person, you can really get freaked out by some of that. And some of them seem so simple, it may seem like, well, that's not even worth doing, because how can that possibly lead to a better result? But in many cases, the right answer for companies is in between. So we're going to start with just a little bit of history and some basics. These are the definitions and basic concepts. Lean is about eliminating waste. Lean is about helping you identify the waste and getting rid of that throughout your supply chain or whatever area you're focusing on within the supply chain. And that's, again, pretty nebulous, pretty much any part of the business. And it doesn't have to be operations. It can be marketing, it can be finance, it can be design, engineering. So in order to reduce waste, we do things like reduce our reliance on our subject matter experts. So we want to have subject matter experts in the workplace, but we also want a lot of people who aren't maybe considered one of those experts or have that expertise to be autonomous and to be able to make a contribution at whatever level. We try to reduce the time it takes to conduct our processes and complete our activities. We try to reduce the material, the amount of material, the amount of not used scrap material, the cost of that material, the time to get that material, and manage the inventory and all those things. And ultimately, we're trying to get a nice, optimized, smooth flow of product through our processes so that we can deliver to our customers in a predictable, stable, reasonably priced manner. Six Sigma takes that a next level up, and it's not only reducing waste, but it's reducing variation within processes. Six Sigma is statistically based. It reduces the overall defects and it makes things more consistent. When we talk about quality, one of the most important aspects of quality is consistency. Some of you who know me know that I teach some college classes, and when I teach a section on quality and quality management, quality control, I always ask my students, how many of you eat at McDonald's? And some of them make faces and say never. Some of them maybe sneak their hand up and say, yeah, I admit that I do. And then a number of them say, yeah, I eat at McDonald's. Who doesn't, right? That's why they're so popular and they're so everywhere. But the reason I ask about McDonald's in particular is because they're consistent. So is McDonald's the best burger that you ever had? I seriously doubt it. Although one student tells me that that's his favorite burger in the whole world is some kind of burger at McDonald's. That's a rarity, but it is consistent. And so if you buy that McDonald's here in Southern California, where I am, in Georgia, where I believe one of the people on this call is located in the Midwest, I have roots back in Missouri, and my husband has them in Ohio. And I've been all over the world, and you can get a lot of these sandwiches pretty much the same in Asia, in Europe, in um, many in Australia, lots of different places. So what we're looking at there is to say it's consistent. No, it's not the best burger probably most of us have ever eaten. But when you're hungry, it has a reasonable price and you know what you're going to get. You're not going to get surprised by a lot of things. Now, that doesn't mean that you might be surprised by some of the variations of offering that Big Mac or that quarter pounder with cheese or just a regular McDonald's hamburger if you buy it in Europe or Asia or Australia. But in general, you know what that's going to be. So consistency is important. And that's what we're trying to do with Six Sigma is to reduce variation. So we improve the consistency. We have better predictability of what our outcomes are going to be so that we can manage our outputs in terms of services and goods that we produce as companies to provide to our customers who are going to generate the revenue that's going to keep us in business. So we're looking for what is the equivalent of 3.4 defects per million opportunity. So defects per million, DPM, DPPM, defective parts per million, lots of different things in that regard in terms of Six Sigma, and we'll look at a little more of that. But that's the main difference is Lean is about eliminating the waste, and Six Sigma really helps us measure that in terms of variation and reducing the variability in our processes, in our products, all of that. And Six Sigma also helps us create or calculate a process capability, which tells us, is this process really robust and can it stand through time and do a lot of different things for us? So we want processes that are capable, but not every process is going to be able to do that. And it's good to know when you don't have a process that's capable in terms of Six Sigma and that you're going to have more variation in there. You need to watch it a little more closely. So again, Lean and Six Sigma, two concepts tightly tied to the Toyota production system, which is Japanese in its origin. It is not new, and it is not just about manufacturing automobiles. The Toyota production system was first created quite a few years ago, and there were two Japanese gentlemen who kind of put these together. They said what we're really trying to do is to get our cash faster. That was the whole premise of the thing, was to figure out how to get their cash flow improved. And they came up with all of these different ideas about how to manufacture. So this is, again, not just for automobile companies. The Toyota production system has been adopted by almost every industry in some way, shape, or form, and either completely or partial pieces of that. And it's across the globe. So if you talk about the TPS, the Toyota production system, anybody who has to do with manufacturing understands that, and a lot of service organizations understand it as well. So since it was originated in the Toyota company, it has Japanese roots. And here's some Japanese terms. You can use this as kind of a reference list. I'm not going to, obviously there's no test on some of these, but you might find some of these familiar and some of them not so familiar. So I'll run through them really quickly. Muda is the word for waste, and we're trying to reduce or eliminate the waste in all of these Lean and Six Sigma activities. Kaizen is a change for good or continuous improvement. So Kaizen is a philosophy, it's an initiative in the company, it's a culture, and it's also a activity that can be done, and it's a quick and dirty kind of, let's look at that and let's improve that process. These Kaizen activities, these Kaizen kind of a blitzkrieg type thing, to use another word that's German in origin. It says we're going to take the next 4 hours and really look at this piece of this process, probably not the entire process, but a piece of it, and say, how can we improve this? And so you take your system, your subject matter experts, you take the people that are actually doing the product and people who should know about it, maybe the engineer, manufacturing engineer, design engineer, maybe a supplier, maybe a production supervisor, small group of people, probably 5, 6, 8, maybe 10, but not more than that, because again, it's a quick activity. We're going to look at what we can do to change that process and improve it. And then we're going to test it, make sure we get the results that we expect. If that works, then we're going to implement them permanently, and we're going to figure out where else we can apply these techniques. So these Kaizen activities in companies can produce some very quick, very measurable results if they're done well. But not every company has the resources to do that. But there's some ways you can do that with limited resources or limited amounts of expertise when you're just trying to identify the waste. And we'll talk a little bit about this. Kanbans are visual signals. This is a pretty common word, common term. These are they're often laminated cards. Sometimes they're printed on plastic, maybe 8.5 by 11 by 12 kind of thing, maybe bigger, sometimes a little bit smaller, but they're visual signals that say either my product is finished and needs to be moved, or I'm almost out of product and I need to be replenished, or this station needs to be replenished so that it doesn't run out. Very common terms. A little bit less common are terms like poka-yoke, which is error proofing. And you can think about this in terms of a manufacturing process, but if you're not a manufacturing person, think about the ATM. The ATM I use, you put your card in, you punch your numbers in, and you get, in my case, it spits the card back at me. And until I remove the card from the machine, it doesn't spit out the money. So in this case, I can't take my money and walk away with my card still in the machine, because it won't give me the money until I take the card out of the machine. So that is error proofing. Another error proof is like the little obnoxious bells in your car, where if your seatbelt isn't engaged, then it will make a noise. That's to tell you if you have children that have wiggled around and maybe undone their seatbelts, or has any other kind of a safety issue, someone in the car forgot to put their seatbelt on, that is an error proof. It says, hey, you can't you can't keep moving if you without knowing that seatbelt is undone. Or the same thing with a door ajar kind of thing. So there's lots of different ways. You can overburden, be inconsistent, Mura, those terms. Gemba and Gemba walk is a term that says we're going to get out of our chairs and go see what's actually happening. I've worked in manufacturing my entire career, and I say you can't know what's going on if you don't get down and walk the factory floor or go talk to people who are out there and see what's going on. So that Gemba walk is a common term. The Genshi Genbetsu, go see for yourself, and then Obeyas. These are arenas, room. We're all familiar a lot of times with the term war room, and Obeya is just that. We set up a war room, an arena for those deep discussions, and we're going to use that space. So some Japanese words that you might have heard before and might encounter in the future. So we need to understand that Industry Week studies have done some analysis on this, and they say 70% of U.S. plants use lean techniques in some way, shape, or form. Only 24 of those report significant results. And yet we also find that success is a term that's really difficult to define. So there's 70% of U.S. plants have decided they've got goals they'd like to improve in these areas. So 70% of them are using these techniques, and yet not all of them are achieving their goals. And this is not only with Lean and Six Sigma, but with a lot of other initiatives. Companies have similar results. Half of the results that they expect to get or they want to get are not necessarily achieved. It's not necessarily that it wasn't the right initiative, but a lot of times you don't have the complete management buy-in, you don't have the skills in the resources you need to put these things in place, or you have a haphazard implementation that really doesn't get to the root of that and help you achieve the goals you'd like. 53% of Fortune 500 companies say they use Six Sigma, so they use some kind of metrics and statistical processes to control their processes. And 82% of the Fortune 100 companies are embracing Six Sigma methodologies. So they're not doing this for the heck of it. They're not doing this because, oh, I don't want to miss out. This is not a FOMO kind of thing, FOMO, missing out. This is, we need to make improvements. And so here's a technique we think might help us do that. So this is how widespread this is. Here's some companies that are using Lean and Six Sigma. Some of these companies are on both sides, and typically you'll see that these companies are using both. I see a typo with Parker Hannifin. I apologize for that, but there's Toyota right there with Lean. Of course, they use Six Sigma as well. But these are companies that we're all familiar with. They don't use these because, again, that they want to be seen as missing something if they don't. They are espousing this. If you're the same generation as me or close to that, you might remember Jack Welch and General Electric when he was leading that, and he put a whole team of Six Sigma black belts across the company trying to get results from that. So he was a big proponent of that. Today, it's a little disheartening for me. I talk to my students in college classes, and they barely know General Electric, and they don't know Jack Welch. So he was a major player in the business world a few years ago. So let's dive into just Lean. So 5 elements, 5S is a really good way to start Lean because we're trying, again, to eliminate the waste. So this is a technique that's been developed. There's 5 Japanese words, and we have sort of translated these into English words that also start with S. And it says, really, we're trying to go, and you want to use these in this order. If some of you are familiar with Marie Kondo, then she is a big proponent of this as well. She's the declutterer. She's the one that wrote The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, I believe is the title. She's done a podcast. She has some different, maybe a Netflix show. But when people ask me, where can I start? What can my company do for them? Why try this? I say, do you have a junk drawer at home? Do you have a closet that needs cleaning out? Do you have a garage that's full of things that you can't find and can't locate, and you would like to be able to do better at that? This is the same thing. So these are real world personal examples of this. But you can also say, is your workplace ready for visitors most anytime? If not, Lean can be an incredible gift to you, yourself, your workplace. So you want to use these steps, again, in the order they're designed for. So the first one says, remove the clutter, get rid of everything that's not essential. Marie Kondo's rule is if it doesn't bring you joy, if you don't use it, or if you don't love it, then get rid of it. So she says, use it or love it. She says, if you've got an antique salad bowl from your grandmother that you don't use very often, you can keep it because you love it and it has sentimental value. But other than that, get rid of things. She's a big proponent of getting rid of books. And if anyone has ever been to my house, they will know that that is not something that my husband and I ascribe to. We are big readers in this house. We always have been, and we have lots of books. So I don't like to get rid of my books either, for my leisure time or for my professional time, but you have to apply. So you have to apply to what makes sense for you. But eliminating clutter, removing non-essential items, that's a good place to start. Once the clutter is gone, then think about, okay, where should the location be so that it doesn't just get piled up? Where is the proper home for these items? And you want to establish that. Then you go through and you actually clean the area, including the tools, the machines, the equipment. So everything looks, what they say, is nearly new. And a lot of people say, well, why don't we start there? And the answer is because you haven't really determined what those things are that need to stay. So you want to make sure that you don't just clean and move everything out and then not end up with what you need. So you want to do steps 1 and 2, the sort and the straighten or set in order first, and then clean everything. And then you'll see what kind of sticks out that might not still belong there. Then the 4th step is you want to make the first 3 steps stick, or make them not too hard to follow, which means if you end up with an organization system on the second step that is too difficult or requires people to have 8 hours of training, it's probably not going to be that friendly and it's not going to stick. So look at what you can do to make sure that people can follow the same patterns. This is where we have shadow boxes and shadow boards where you have the outline of something, that this goes there. The scissors go here because that's the markings on the table. The tape gets hung here. The mop gets put away here, all those kinds of things. So then you set it up so that you can actually standardize. You've got a common approach, common standards, and it's easy to follow. Then you want to be able to sustain it. If you've ever cleaned out your junk drawer, your closet, your garage, and felt really good about it, and then come back 3 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months later, 6 months later, and you suddenly notice that, gosh, I cleaned this out and it's a mess again. That means that you weren't able to sustain it. So you want to say, okay, how do we go back and do this over? And then make sure we put in ways that we can sustain it to continuously improve on that. We want to maintain it and be able to keep getting better and better. Today, some companies add a 6th S for safety. I don't know what the Japanese word is, but I come from manufacturing and safety is always inherent in everything. That's the first thing you think about, is how to make the workplace safe. So I don't think it needs to be added, but if it does for you and your particular application, then by all means use the 6th S there. So these are the things that you need to do. And Marie Kondo pretty much does this in her book and says, get rid of these things, put it back in place, make sure you've got it all set up so that you can do this. And then you want to be able to sustain it. So there's all kinds of different wastes. If you say, oh gosh, I don't know what to look for in terms of waste, there's all kinds of lists. You can find them that have 5 forms of waste, 7 forms of waste, 8 forms of waste. This one is one that comes from a couple of the things that I researched. The original Toyota production system listed 7, and the 8th one, this underused talent, was adopted a lot by companies in the Western world who said, oh yeah, I get this. We don't want to waste our talent. So I apologize for that. It should be AT&T that's apologizing. Hopefully you guys can hear me again. And we're back. Should be still recording. Yeah, AT&T is not my very favorite friend there, but we'll jump back into this. So these are these 8 wastes. Again, Toyota production system came up with the 7, and I'll run through these quickly because some are more intuitive than others. Defects, right? And if you're in a production system, anything that is defective is not a good thing. And this is not just bad product or poorly executed, but can be missing documentation, lack of process controls, tools and machinery that aren't properly maintained, defects in the machinery and equipment as well as in the part itself. Errors like incorrect inventory balances. If you have a inventory balance that's off, that can be a defect, and that can cause a lot of problems in your system and in your processing. So you want to look for defects in all kinds of forms. Excess processing means typically that you have processes that aren't well designed. It can include management issues like lacking communication, redundancies in processes, duplications of data, or it can be using the ability to use incorrect tools or poor layouts, misused equipment. So any kind of excess processing that's actually having you do things not effectively and not efficiently. Overproduction. In lean, the optimal lot size is 1, and a lot of people struggle with that term because, but it's really so cost effective for us to make our lot size of 100. I get that, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use that 100. But what we want to do is to look at the flexibility and really matching our production to the demand. So reducing lot sizes or not sticking to a standard lot size can be very helpful to the business. If you need 97 and you make 100, you might say, oh, well, we're going to use those. If you have high confidence or a track record of being able to use those extra 3 units, then that's a good thing. If you don't have a home for them or don't have an intended expected home, then those 3 extra might sit on your shelf for a long time, just incurring cost, taking up space, and not being very effective. So you have to look at your processes and say what makes sense. Waiting time is another one. We all have waiting times that we expect, and we have built-in waiting times to help make sure we have cushions and make the flow go really well in our production systems. But when you have excessive waiting or waiting times that are preponderance of them throughout your processes, you might want to stop and say, can we just get a nice steady flow of material through our factory, through our supply chain that can improve our productivity and probably our profitability? So look for that weight that might be excessive. Inventory is one of those essential things. I'm a manufacturing person. I don't have parts. I can't build. But we want to have the right amount. So we are the Goldilocks of the world in manufacturing, trying to make sure we don't have too much or too little, but just right. And we know that inventory is not just parts, right? It's space in the warehouse. It's the cost of people working in the warehouse. It's security, insurance, floor space, all of those. And we have raw material, WIP material, finished goods material, and that doesn't include all of the MRO, the supplies, the tooling, all of these things that we have as part of our inventory management. So not all of it is a waste. We need raw materials to produce goods. And our work in process represents the products that are imminent and going to be able to produce revenue. But excessive inventory, too much safety stock or too little safety stock, long transportation times, incorrect amounts of inventory, aging inventory, all these things can be waste, and we want to look for those, dig those out, and make improvements in those areas. Moving things, we move things around the factory floor as well as in and out of a factory. We have lots and lots of nodes of transportation. If we use 3PLs, 4PLs, 5PLs, if we are shipping overseas, we might do a combination of shipping both air and ocean shipment. We can do lots of things. So where is the transportation, and is it excessive? Is it excessive in terms of time, in terms of number of changes you have to make, number of nodes? Lots of ways to measure that and improve it. Motions of materials, people, equipment, all of those things. There's transportation, and then there's the motion. So motion can be reaching, bending, lifting, all the ergonomic kind of things, which you want to look at. And then again, look at not just your people, but the equipment, the materials, whatever. And then finally, then number 8, the underused talent. If companies don't utilize their talent well, they lose good people, they don't manage out the people that aren't contributing, and it can be a big waste of time and energy and money for the company, and you're losing a lot of contributions. So lean values are very good. It's important because this tool of lean helps companies in lots of different ways. Knowing this methodology and obtaining the value from it can be separate items. And so you want to know the methodologies and obtain the value from it throughout your organization. So you have to make it part of your culture. You have to embrace not only the process, but these values throughout the organization, which is that we want to look at things in terms of our customers. So we want to look at that voice of the customer and do things with the customer in mind, understand what the customer's needs and wants are. Another way to look at that is to become the patient, which means we're going to walk through that entire value stream and we're going to say, what happens here? How did we get here? How do we get to the next step? All of those things. One way to do it, when I was in school to be an industrial engineer, they always taught us the 4 M's, which are Man, material, machine, and methods. Man is the people involved. Material is any of the materials involved. Machines are all the tools and equipment. And then the methods are the processes that we use. Metrics are a good thing. So measurements is another one in there. And then we want to understand the environment. One of the principles of lean and values is that workers are assets and we use cross-functional teams. We want subject matter experts, and we want to use cross-functional teams because we're going to get better ideas when we put different perspectives in one place. So we want, again, customer needs. We're looking at things like value stream mapping, product flow charts and flowing the process. We can do things like re-engineering. We want to understand the flow. It is a supply chain. So we want to understand the links and the process. We want this nice smooth flow of product through the supply chain. Pull systems versus push systems. Pull systems are much leaner than push systems, but it doesn't mean that you can't put some lean principles into a push system, which means you're building to a forecast or anticipated demand for your product. And then perfection. We're all trying to get to that area of nirvana, that perfection. We can't get there probably, but what we want to do is to really look at how we can have this continuous improvement and never be satisfied. When we make improvements, we want to celebrate those, include everybody that helped us do that, and then say, okay, what's next? How can we move another rung higher on that ladder? How can we keep going? It isn't about demotivating. It's really about motivating people. Look, we did this, we accomplished this. What can we do next? Lots of obstacles in this. If you don't do this successfully, you can have the results that are just blah. How many of you are familiar with this? If you can understand, we don't want this to be just another fad. We don't want to say, oh, we can't do this. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough resources. We're not really manufacturing companies, so we don't need to do this. There's too much math in this. We tried this before, it doesn't work, all these kinds of things. So if you're in that situation, look for some other examples, some other ways of doing this. There's some books available. If you read something like The Goal, that's a good book for you. There's lots of people like myself and other companies who can help you do this and really make a better start of this. Lean organizations are accountable. You have, they're adaptive, agile, flexible, all those responsive, all those words that we talk about now. They have a nice balance between what's strategic and what's tactical, and they're full of respect. So these are great organizations to work in because people communicate well, they listen, they follow up. They start making more money for the company, and that makes everybody happier. So that means more raises, more bonuses, more longevity, and fewer layoffs, all of these things. So it really does improve the culture of the organization and make it a nice place to work. And isn't that what we want? We all spend so much time and energy with either in or around the workplace. And we want that to be enjoyable time. So if you've cleaned up your junk drawer, your closet, your garage, whatever, and maybe spent some hours or even a couple of days sometimes in the garage it takes, and when you step back, doesn't it feel really good? You're so proud of yourself. You're so happy with the results. And again, if you go back and say, oh gosh, it's back the way it was before, that's like a gut punch. We don't want that. So we want to get to the point where you walk in that garage or open that drawer, and you usually don't think about it because it is available. The things in there are where they're supposed to be. You know where those things are. And if you see something out of place, it's easy to move it back to where the correct place is. So we almost forget about it, except sometimes you contrast that with someone else's junk drawer, something else you think, another drawer or closet, and you say, wow, I need to do that because it's really good to have that in the right place. So I spent a lot of time on lean because I think it's easier to understand, and that's the easiest place to implement. Let's talk about Six Sigma really quickly. Again, 3.4 defects per 1 million opportunities. I've had clients say, well, we don't make a million of anything. And I say, you don't have to. It's a statistical calculation that says if you did make 100 of anything, how many defects would this process produce? So if you want it to be less than 4, and Six Sigma calculates or equates to 3.4. But Six Sigma is data driven. It looks at defects, processes improvements, and there's a couple of different processes you can use that are pretty common. DMAIC is the first one, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Not implement, but improve and then control. And another one is the DMADV, which is define, measure, analyze, design, and verify. So they're processes and they're very specific about the order that you do. Here's the DMAIC model. Again, it's improve. So we're going to define the real problem. We want to get to the real heart of that. Defining isn't easy to do. We want to get to not the symptoms, but what is the root cause in there. Then we're going to do some measurements. We're going to do process maps, flow charts, probably take some measurements, do some Pareto analysis, which are bar charts, maybe charts and graphs, do some analysis. Again, we want to make sure we get to that root cause. And the FMEA, which is the error kind of thing that we're looking at. If you don't know these terms, don't worry about it because you can find other people. The FMEA is failure mode and effects analysis. So you say, oh, I don't know what that is. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't start this process or try this out, because you can look these things up and you can get experts that have help, that have expertise in these areas to help. You can make your improvements, design of experiments, Taguchi methods, which is related to the design of experiments. You isolate your variables. Really what you say is, okay, this is the improvement we want to do. We think if we make these changes, we're going to get this result. That's what you do. If you validate these are the results we expected, we wanted, then you say, okay, now we're going to institute that and we're going to put controls in place. So statistical process control is just that. We're going to measure that. We're going to chart that. We're going to put some quality plans together. We're going to do those things to make sure that we don't have a lot of backslides, or that we catch it if we start to do that, and that we have ways to catch things like different operators making different mistakes or repeating mistakes. So we want to be able to catch those things quickly. We know that things happen and people change, processes change, products change, designs change, all these things, equipment. So the idea of the control says we're going to catch things before it gets too far off our desired level, and then we'll be able to make the adjustments and get back to where we need to be. So here's some terms to be familiar with. There's some statistical significance to, again, Six Sigma. Means and averages. Most third graders can calculate an average of a few part numbers, and you get more sophisticated in math as you go through school. But means and averages are pretty easy, and tools like Excel really help you do a lot of this. Standard deviations, also called a sigma. That's a little bit different concept, and you need a little bit higher math for that. The range is just the difference between the lowest and the high value in a sample size. The sample size is, I made 1,000 of these. Do I have to check all 1,000, or can I check a subset of those? So, and then how many do I need to check? And what's the pass rate to make sure that I'm good, which is your confidence level. And there's easy ways to learn this. And there's a lot of reference that you can get on the internet for that. We're looking at what we call variable data, which is things that we can measure. It's quantitative, versus attribute data, which are things that we look at as like a pass fail. Was it good or was it bad? So attribute data is more qualitative. Six Sigma lends itself more to quantitative variable data, but attribute data can be collected and turned into quantitative by the fact that we're measuring it. So again, I don't want to get overwhelming with people with this, but we want to do some control charts. We want to look at it over time just to see, are we still have that consistency that we want in our products that we're going to sell to our customers and that they're going to be happy with. So here's a couple different ways to look at some of the Six Sigma things. This is the normal bell curve, if you've heard of that. You probably remember that from maybe 7th grade math or something. And you can see we've got a green one and a blue one. Our target is where we want the mean to be. So if we look at the blue one, it's centered pretty well, but the blue one is a lot broader, which means that our range of values is a lot wider than in the green one. Under the green curve is a nice narrow and tall curve, which is usually highly desirable. But in this case, we're not getting the target values in there. So we want to move this green curve over so that it's centered around this target line, or we want to compress the blue one, make it a little taller and less wide to really get the improvement we want. So everything can be improved. We just look at what we want to do. When we talk about sigma, we talk about standard deviations. So again, Excel can calculate standard deviations for you. The idea of 6 sigma means we're looking at 6 on either side of the mean. And if you just look at what this means as to 1 sigma on each side, that encompasses 68% of the value. So then that says if we only have 1 sigma, we're going to have good products roughly 70% of the time. Maybe okay, maybe not. But then if we get to 2 sigmas, 95%. And 3 sigmas, again, on either side, that's 99.7% of the values are going to be under the curve, which is not too bad. So we don't all need 6 sigma quality. In fact, there's very few things that do need 6 sigma quality. It doesn't mean that it's not a goal that we keep working toward, but in many cases, 95% or 99.7% are very acceptable ranges for our variation, and companies would be very happy with that. So here's another way to look at it. We're looking at, again, 68%, 95%, the 99.73 with the 3 sigmas. And then here, way out here, under the bell curve is going to be where we get to 6 sigma. And then we've got range charts, and then we've got X-bar charts that we calculate. So if you don't know how to do these, don't worry about it. Again, there's lots of ways you can learn, and there's lots of people that can help you create the right charts. One of the things to keep in mind is early in my career, we did a statistical process control, initiative. And we had some people that were assigned to do that. We had a process, a machine that they were tracking, and they were tracking the pre-cut and the final cut. They decided to track the pre-cut first, which was probably not a bad idea. They got the pre-cut and they had charts that looked really good. But my manager came to me a little bit irate and said, we had to shut that machine down because our results on the final product are not good. So we had pre-cut data that said, oh, this is really good. But you know what? On the final product, the correlation wasn't there. So something that was being done in the pre-cut looked good by itself, but that really wasn't the product that we were shipping. And so you don't want to this isn't about making pretty charts, right? This isn't about making things look good. This is about actually having good final product. So you want to make sure you look at that. P and C charts, proportions of defectives or percentages. C charts are the counts. Again, attribute data typically, but we chart them and they look like measurable data. So there's lots of other tools that we can use, like asking why 5 times. If you've ever been around a toddler or a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old who says, why? Why does this or why is that? And then you answer them and they say, well, why? And why and why, and it gets irritating. And so it can be irritating and it can be a little uncomfortable, but that's kind of the purpose. Because when you ask why 5 times, it helps you get to the root cause and really separate the symptoms from that root cause. So asking why 5 times can be a good thing. The who, what, when, where, why, how is also a good thing to look at. Other tools like Just in Time, which some authors put with Lean and Six Sigma, where I think Just in Time is a inventory policy or inventory practice. It is lean, but not everything applies to that. But just in time systems and just in time processes and initiatives are still good. There's the simple plan, do, check, act model that a lot of us may have learned along the way somewhere. Kanbans, check sheets, bottlenecks, all of these kinds of things are good tools to have in your toolbox, and to be pulling these out at the right time can really help a company do better. There are actual certifications and roles within Lean and Six Sigma. White and yellow belts tend to be company initiated and something that a company adopts internally. There are some programs online that are white or yellow, but you need to be careful about those. Green belts are much more common. It makes you familiar with typically the DMAIC process. There's some testing required. There is some process things, maybe a little bit of statistics, and generally you have to complete a project. I have my green belt from the University of Michigan, but my company contracted with them to get a lot of us certified. So my certificate says the University of Michigan, but it was a company initiative that got a lot of us trained. And so that was a good thing to have. There are black belts and master black belts, a lot heavier on statistics. Again, you have to have project completions. You can get these online. Some of these programs can be pretty expensive, so you want to look for, shop around. You can find a good program that is not as expensive, and you can find a program that's might have the right name with it, but it doesn't have as much meat to it, and it might cost you a lot more money. And then these are the people that are actually trained. And then the champions within the company are the ones that help get these projects set up, funded, put the right prioritization in place, get you resources, remove obstacles. So this is helping people that have the vision, can see how the company's mission lines up with these, and ID the right projects that are going to be indicative and helpful to contribute to improvements across the company. So it's important to companies and consumers. If you can remember back to 2016, the Samsung Note 7s, the one that were burning people, it seems like a long time ago, late 2016, so now 8 years. But this was a phone that got all kinds of accolades, and some people loved it. The critics loved it when it was first introduced. Samsung had almost 24% of the smartphone market at the time. And it dropped to under 19% just from this one thing. Their market share today is about 15%, and Apple before this only had about 22%. Today, Apple has the lion's share, about 62% of the smartphone market. So this one thing shifted that considerably in a short period of time. It cost Samsung, I've seen different things, because Samsung doesn't have to report all of this because they're not an American-based company. They do have there is a entity in the US, but it cost them probably $20 million and upwards to pull that phone back, go through all of that inventory, redesign the phone, and ultimately to get the Note 8 on the market. More recently, Abbott baby formula, that was a nightmare for people with infants. They shut that plant down for 4 to 5 months. They had several recalls on products. Stores are reporting up to 74% out of stock rates. There were some lawsuits filed. Some of them failed, but it still cost time and money. When they did get their plant reworked and back up, they had a storm and knocked them down for another 2 weeks, where they came in to repair some roof and things like that. It's been a very difficult challenge for Abbott, and for all the consumers who have infants that need baby formula, especially babies who have specialized formulas that they need because they have allergies or other health issues that narrowed their options. And the baby formula market is very interesting looking at how states authorize companies to be part of their WIC programs, women's, infants, and children, and approve them to be sold. So it's not a completely open market because a lot of the contracting is done with states. And if you get a contract with the state, then you're going to put a lot of product there. If you're not, then it doesn't pay your company to do that. So you go to another state where you do get part of that. So it's a big, complicated thing, but it was a very difficult time for a couple of years to get through. Boeing, I don't know where to start with Boeing. That first they had the Max software, which was horrific, and people died because of that. They think they got that fixed. Now they're having door issues. You know, they found a door in the backyard, and I think it was a home in Oregon. Planes are grounded. Now they have 2 astronauts that went up for like a week into space, and now they won't be coming home until February. So there's all kinds of things, and a lot of this is around quality issues. So a lot of things to do. So if you are interested in this, what I know for sure is there's a better way to utilize Lean and Six Sigma philosophies in any and every business. Companies need to look at these methodologies. They know that they're gonna help employee morale as well as your bottom line. There's lots of benefits, measurable benefits, and then there's a lot of environmental, cleaner workspaces, waste reduction, more teamwork, more respect, more involvement from employees, lots of benefits that are tangible, but some that are intangible, but really help a workplace and help you keep good people and attract new people. So getting out of the box, looking at operations and tasks from a customer's perspective and infiltrating that throughout your workforce is a very powerful thing to do. And it's basic math. Revenue minus expenses equals profits. And when you reduce the waste and reduce the cost of your expenses, then your profitability is going to improve without doing anything to your revenue. So black belts can save 3 and 4 times their salaries over the course of a year. And if they're not doing that, then they're not doing what they need to do. And we all need to generate savings in our businesses. So I use this supplier management model. I have 4 quadrants: performance management, supplier relationship management, risk management, and business fundamentals. So in order to do Lean and Six Sigma, we're looking at things like their scorecards with suppliers, corrective actions, metrics, expectations, measurements, and we need to know how to manage quality. So these are skills that your company needs, and you can get and you can hone and you can improve. So have you tried this? If you would like to try it, you're not satisfied with results, you don't know where to start, then myself and Purple Link are in your corner. Our calendar is open. You can schedule a call with me to talk about any of these kinds of things. Callwithjane.com. We'll take a look at what's going on with your company. I'll offer you some suggestions for next steps and help you create a high-level strategy and action plan for what's going to happen next. For dynamic dialogue, I see we're at the end of the hour, so we're going to continue on the 4th Tuesday through 2025. So we're going to do tariffs and global supply chains. I've heard so many, we're inundated with politicians, but let's cut through some of the political talk and talk really about what are tariffs, what do they mean to the companies, what do they mean to us as consumers, and how do they affect global supply chains. So we're going to do that in September. Then in October, we're going to talk about compliance and why compliance programs are not really an option. For those of you interested in CPSM, I just finished a CPSM Exam 1 course, and I'm going to start Exam 2 in October. You do not have to take these in order. So if you missed the Exam 1, haven't taken it, don't worry. You can start with Exam 2. I'm going to start that in October. Look for some emails on that. Please give me some time before you check out the website because it's woefully outdated. But you can always contact me directly at jane@purplelink.net. So I think somebody asked for an email earlier that you can use that one, jane@purple-link.net. finally, I'm going to leave you with my Strive to Thrive for the month. And this is a quote from Bruce Hamilton, who calls himself the old lean dude. He writes a blog to help people understand the Toyota production system and Lean and Six Sigma philosophies. He also wrote an E2 continuous improvement system, and which is a learn by doing guide for lean transformation. So he has some information. There's, like I say, there's tons of books and worksheets and all kinds of examples. But he says continuous improvement is not about the things you do well. That's work. Continuous improvement is about removing the things that get in the way of your or our work. The headaches, the things that slow us down, that's what continuous improvement is about. And I think that really kind of hits the nail on the head. So that's what I have for this month. I'll take questions, comments, and whatever. And then I will post this on YouTube and send out the link to any of you who are subscribed. And I'll also send out a PDF of the slides.